Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled jealous homeowner association Karen terrorized us ever since we moved into the HOA neighborhood. She demanded we destroy our pool and finally she took matters into her own hands. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the stories. My name is Dane Mayhew, a middle-aged corporate executive, and today I'm gonna tell you the harrowing tale of the Karen leading our local HOA and our fight against her. It all started when I bought a new house, moving from a tiny apartment in the city to idyllic suburbs, sacrificing proximity for sanity and a longer commute. Within days of our initial move-in, we were graced with warm introductions from our neighbors, which stopped when we met the local HOA president. We were warned about her with the lofty nickname of Princess Karen, but we did not believe anyone could be as bad as the rumors. Oh boy, Karen zoomed up to our front yard in a golf cart in the middle of our housewarming party, demanding for the music to be turned down because it was late. It was 5 p.m. Ignoring the pleasantries and introductions, I calmly explained that it was neither loud nor late, and she left in a huff when she realized she was not gonna get her own way. She returned an hour later with a notepad and scrawled out a very unofficial looking fine, signed by the HOA president. And she made it very clear that we should pay. I met with the HOA board after a few days to challenge the fine. Karen was present but remained quiet as she seemed to barely hold back a raging temper. The end result was twofold. The fine was legitimate and now I had pissed off the president even more. From that day on, it seemed to be Karen's personal mission and sole purpose in life to destroy me. Each week, fines and notices from the HOA administration filled our mailbox. These letters were issued for the slightest and most ridiculous of grievances. I tried to fight initially, but after a while I got tired and did end up paying some of them off to avoid the extra hassle. Because of our history, Karen seemed to take great pleasure in directing these charges at my household as a cheap form of stress relief, looking to bankrupt me or force me out of the area for good. Karen ended up crashing an especially raucous pool party we were throwing over the weekend due to the good weather. It was as though the happier other people were, the angrier or more miserable she became instead. She referenced an obscure rule of the HOA, stating that our pool was too big and must be filled in as a result. The party summarily booed her until she left in frustration. The next day she returned with the same demand. If I did not want any trouble, the pool had to go. I did some research after that and found out that many other neighbors had pools and other neighborhoods did not have such a weird rule. So, contacting the previous homeowner, I found a long history of similar problems that I had been facing with her. The homeowner said that Karen would often find something to complain about and had brought up the pool before, but after ignoring her, she eventually stopped demanding it. With this in mind, I decided to follow suit, arguing on each occasion that the pool was within my rights and I was going to keep it. And then I had my business trip and made the poor decision of voicing it during an argument with the Karen. I came back on Monday evening to find large tire tracks carved from the front of my yard that lead around the house to the back. With cautious hesitation, I followed them to find an even more horrible sight. Where my beautiful expanse of blue water once rested, now sat piles of pale gray sand that filled and spilled out of the pool and into the surrounding garden as well. Karen had threatened consequences if I didn't comply, but never before had I imagined that she would take things this far. I was livid, and for good reason. Until now her words had only been that, words, but now her bite became worse than her bark. That was the last straw. The Princess Karen was now in my sights for some serious revenge. Although she never admitted to being the culprit, she was smug about the incident when other neighbors came to see what was going on. The others had known her for far longer than I, and despite Karen's best efforts, we are not fooled by her deception. I held in my temper and waited patiently for the right time to strike. One day, after a reasonably long rant about her rules and my place in her neighborhood, I carefully followed her home and found a stranger's car in their driveway. Curiously, I crept closer and through the window I spotted that she was engaged with another man. I was overjoyed that the revenge I had long planned could now be put in motion. 3 months later, I guess her husband had gotten my anonymous account on that spicy afternoon because he was in the process of divorcing her and moving out of the house. Karen stood in the yard pleading her case through a sea of tears, but the performance was not believable. Karen kept the house as well as her role as HOA president, but now somehow had managed to become more sullen and malicious than she had before. To all the other neighbors now, as well as me, the monthly maintenance rate we paid to the HOA was increased and the neighborhood saw some very weird fines such as the dirty car policy and no trash allowed outside being on the pavement too early before pickup. At the next HOA meeting, many members of the neighborhood attended and voiced their anger at these sudden and irredeemable changes in cost. My voice being especially active when it came to accusations about my pool and more serious cases of direct harassment and prejudice. In the end, the HOA board told us not to worry and did nothing to fix the issue. Still angry and dissatisfied, we marched in a unified angry mob over to Princess Karen's house and demanded action. She met us in the doorway but refused to cave to the pressure of her community's needs. After months of legal proceedings, the neighborhood finally got its answer. The increasing costs and missing money was being embezzled by its tyrannical princess for her livable income. Following on from her divorce, she was secretly draining the HOA of its funds to fuel her lifestyle unapologetically. We took this information to the police, who were very happy to turn up to her house later and bring her in for questioning over the serious charges. A week later, her story was plastered over every local channel of the evening news. Princess Karen, president of the local HOA, has been found guilty of embezzlement, extortion, and harassment. During a very short and direct trial, she was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison on top of a huge sum to repay to the community and the HOA itself. Her house was also repossessed during her time behind bars because she had stopped payments to keep it. The HOA quickly sought to distance themselves from the would-be criminal and replaced her following a short period of nominations and suggestions. The new HOA president to grace the neighborhood was a much nicer and more agreeable lady. Her reign was pleasant and peaceful, unlike her predecessors, and we were all better off for it. And yeah, ripe stars, I guess I'm happy for OP that they now have a better HOA leader, but in the end I would prefer to not have any sort of HOA leader above me and just live in my home peacefully without any sort of busybodies around me. I don't know about you. Anyway, let's continue with the stories. The next one is titled, How Screwed is My HOA? My HOA in Northern Virginia exists because it exists. There are 2 trails, 3 basketball courts and a pond. We pay maybe $40 a month in HOA fees, aka basically nothing. 150 homes in total. In 2007, we installed a shed in our backyard. The shed is 8 foot tall, meets county setback requirements and is visible somewhat from the street at the right angle. We never asked our HOA ACC, Architectural Control Committee, for permission. This is because several neighbors had put up fences, installed tree houses, trampolines, sheds, etc. without anyone saying boo about it. Fast forward 15 years, new neighbors move in behind us. The husband is a certified wimp. Wife is a hate has no home here type of person who drives an Escalade and seems to feel that way about hate, except when it comes to her neighbors. She has gotten all crazy about my shed and my neighbor's treehouse. Called in the county to have a building inspector check for setback compliance. It complies and the inspector said so. She is now insisting the ACC take action against the shed and the neighbor's treehouse for not having been approved by the HOA. ACC is getting agitated, but I'm not sure if it is about me or about her. Now, this was 15 years ago that it was installed. I have proof. The HOA has no language reserving rights if it fails to enforce the rules and covenants. Do I tell her and the HOA to go pound sand given the passage of time and their failure to enforce, latches I believe it's called? So, update to the story I posted yesterday. I have a pleasant neighbor who doesn't like accessory dwellings of neighbors and appears to really love the smell of fecal matter deep into her nasal cavity. Anyhow, the president of the HOA was walking his dog down the street while I was vacuuming out my car. He lives on the same street. I know him, not well, but we've been pretty cordial at past association picnics. For those asking about our dues, this is what part of it goes towards. An alcohol fuel bacchanal every August, worth the dues we pay out. Kind of. So anyhow, I walk down to the mailbox and we will call him Ralph. Ralph walks by and he says, "Hey there." I say, "Hey there," back, and we engage in chit-chat. After about 3 minutes of small talk, I decide to go for broke. "So did you hear about the new neighbor behind me?" He rolls his eyes and laughs. First thing he said is, "She's been an annoyance since before she moved in." He further said that his own wife said that his job as president was going to be miserable from this point forward. The end of the conversation was basically, "You've got nothing to worry about." I replied that he needs to not ever resign or quit for the sake of the neighborhood. Okay. So this is all said and done. Thank you for the suggestions and reassurance. And yeah guys, I guess if I would have to live in such a neighborhood and actually had a nice HOA president, I would try to become his friend or something. Because surely, like we can see in this story, that can certainly be helpful. Anyway, the next one is titled "Never Mess with Property Lines." I'm a senior construction superintendent in the DFW area. The project I'm currently on is a 13-acre site smack in the middle of an extremely affluent area to the north of Dallas. 3 weeks ago, a city inspector that we will call Joe came into the site office and said that they received a complaint about a sprinkler and soaker line being damaged during excavation for the fire lane. He, my landscaper, and myself went to investigate, discovered where a small fitting had blown out of the line. Landscaper repaired it. I went up to knock on the door to explain to them the issue and inform them of the repair. I got no answer at the door, so I left a card and a note asking them to call me, but they never did. A week later, Joe comes in and mentions that they have reached out again about the noise from equipment, which is odd because anyone with heavy equipment is currently working on the other end of the property. I again went to speak with them, got no answer at the door and left a card again. Yesterday, in walks Joe to tell me that they are complaining about our construction fence which is on their property and killing their grass. The fence is 12 inches from their fence and our specs call for it to be a minimum of 15 inches from the property line. So I pull up our CAD files on the survey plat so I can make sure we have it placed exactly and realize that their wooden fence is 4 feet onto our property. And by the way guys, my apologies, I simply always confuse feet and inches. I really don't know why. Anyway, their house is about 14 inches onto our property. During all of this, I get an email from the city asking me to replace the construction fence squarely on our property line. The email is sent to me, the apparent homeowner Joe, and my project manager. I brought the surveyor spec out yesterday to pinpoint our property corners and give us some 10-foot offsets, reference points 10 foot east of the property line for line of sight to measure from. I knocked on the homeowner's door again and got no answer, mind you, every time there were cars in the driveway. Fast forward to this morning, my fence crew showed up and they began moving the fence onto the property line, which takes 31 inches, 2 feet 7 inches off their driveway. And 18 feet of the road where it ends at the property, which was previously a cul-de-sac. The client finally reached out, or more accurately, came to the site office in a huff. I explained the issue, showed him the plat, and he left with some unkind words flowing from him, like diesel exhaust on a steep incline. I put a pause on the fence relocation just to soothe the wound. My PM called him, I called the city right away, ROW engineer, and our client, and we set up a meeting that just ended. He claimed that our plat was wrong, the engineer and everyone else disagreed. The back and forth went on long enough for the client, who is an extremely laid-back and quiet gentleman, to finally speak up and basically say, "We're just gonna go ahead and sell you the property you have stolen, at current market value plus 10%. In this area that's not cheap. If that is not acceptable, we will just have you move your fence, cut out your driveway and use the east side of your home for advertisement. Or you can back off, let these guys work, and we will give you lifetime use of the area you currently occupy, so as long as there's no more hassling of any kind." The guy asked me if we would move the fence back out and I told him no. I agreed to take it off his driveway, but the street and green space belonged to us. We only did what he asked us to do, the engineer who asked me to move it agreed. So there it is, the story again, the fallout and the conclusion. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, that was pretty insane malicious compliance. And I gotta say, even in real life, I am a fan myself of doing exactly what other people tell me to do, even if I know it is wrong, especially if they are the kinds of people that always think they are right. The next one is titled Amazing Petty Revenge. This happened back in the early 2000s. I was a director of a smallish business unit of a large-ish company. We used a highly specific software tool which did its job extremely well. Unfortunately, finding candidates with experience in that tool was very difficult owing to the small installation base and how technical it was. One of the team members from our first implementation was a young kid almost fresh out of college. He was a really sharp guy. He ran rings around the other consultants and was the de facto systems architect, delivery manager and lead developer, despite there being other very expensive consultants in those roles. He and his team finished well under time and budget and left us with a well-running system that we used every single day. About 3 years later, I got a lateral promotion and needed to backfill my position. I remembered the one guy and thought he would be perfect despite his relative greenness. So I reached out and asked if he would be interested. He had moved on from that company. They made good stuff, but they were toxic. And he said he was very interested, but sadly had not been able to get work using the tool because the non-compete he had to sign precluded him working with the tool or in any related field, regardless of whether or not the employer and client was a customer of the company. In fact, reading the NDA and NC, it could easily have been interpreted as precluding him from working anywhere, since just about any sizable company could in theory have made use of the product. I checked with our legal department and nothing in our contract with them prevented me from hiring the guy. It was only his NDA and NC that stood in the way. Our lawyers advised us just dropping the subject, but just in case they sued him and added us. We would win, but it would be a pain in the butt and take so long that we would not need the guy anymore. Being a stubborn ass, I took that as a challenge and reached out to his former boss. I explained the situation and how the guy was not their employee anymore anyway, so there really was not any competition to begin with. He countered with an offer to rehire the guy and let him come on board as my replacement. That did not fly because we did not source directors or above from consulting firms. Plus, they wanted an absurdly high hourly rate. I offered to pay a generous finder's fee to set aside the NDA and NC agreement. However, they refused, saying that they simply did not allow anyone to work in that field or for any current, past or prospective clients for 4 years after they left their company. That went on for nearly 6 months, in which time our annual contract renewal process kicked off. With legal's help, I proposed an addendum offering an even larger finder's fee, but no dice. They declined, not part of their business model. Also not allowed under their current operating procedures. Nope. So yeah, not gonna. This is despite the fact that his NDA and NC would expire in just over a year. What they failed to take into consideration was that we were also in the middle of a company-wide series of recompetes, in other words, evaluating existing tools and exploring new ones at the time. They had literally submitted an RFP response during this whole back and forth, and honestly, I don't think they cared, being the incumbent vendor and having what was probably the best product at the time. To them, it was just a pro forma exercise. They even reused their response from the original RFP. The thing is, staffing was one of the RFP selection criteria. That was their critical error. Staffing had traditionally been given a low weight because all of these tools were pretty esoteric and hard to find anyone to work on/with. We rarely even worried about it, assigning the default 5 out of 10 to every vendor. Obviously, based on this company, that needed to change. So the next meeting of the RFP committee, I related our guy's story and suggested that we rethink our prioritization rules. Everyone agreed, and so we upped the weight to 10 on a range of 1, aka not important, to 10, which is vitally important. Because the selection criteria had changed, we re-evaluated all the proposal with an eye towards staffing. Most vendors' submissions rated about the same as before, but the incumbent vendor's rating in the staffing category dropped to 0 out of 10. The incumbent vendor went from top slot to 2/3 down the list and got a do not purchase flag due to a 0 in a critically weighted criterion. I had kept our CIO in the loop this whole time, so it was no surprise to him when the RFP committee submitted their recommendation. I asked if he preferred to just use it as leverage and not drop them, based on the amount of effort it would take to convert over to a new tool. However, he said no and followed up with, "Their company values don't align with ours," which I thought was a great way to think about it. We awarded the contract to the next highest rated vendor and, based on the CIO's directive, took the other company off our list of approved vendors. They never saw a dime after we sunsetted the system. By then my choice of candidate had moved on to another opportunity, so I feel no sympathy for that vendor. They cost me someone I'm sure would have ended up being my boss someday and dicked around so much that we just did not want to associate with them. Total loss to me, time and a great prospect. Total loss to them, millions of dollars in revenue. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm actually curious, what do you think about these kinds of stories? They are from r/malicious compliance, and these stories, I would say, they are kind of business related, and I'm not sure if you like these stories or not, so please let me know in the comments. Either way, if you have enjoyed today's videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.